Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Great.
Chris.
All right. So thanks for your patience here. I think we're back on track technically. So I wanted to first acknowledge, I think Walter had a few of the same discussion points I had, but I wanted to kind of go in more detail around showing some of the demonstrations around it. Obviously, Walter and Skip are essentially legends in healthcare VR, so I will always defer to them. But wanted to give you kind of a quick overview. I think Walter touched upon this, but we do know that there's a brief history of VR. I mean, VR has kind of come into the public forefront the past few years, but in reality, we've seen it in the 60s and 70s. So these are some kind of DoD images from way back. And really kind of this was the first generation, if you will. This is kind of a 3D movie, if you will, type experience. And then we kind of went to the second wave. NASA obviously has been doing a lot of investment and R&D and simulation work in virtual reality and augmented reality, and they continue to be an innovator today. So back in the 80s and 90s, we kind of really had started getting the next wave, the second wave, technology started coming together. We had more advances in computer graphics technology. There are actually arcades that started popping up in the early 90s, and they even made a postage stamp out of that too. So it did come, it's gone, it came again, left, and now we're back kind of into, well, this is not really the current generation, but this is another example of, imagine wearing that in your everyday activities. So we are really now at the stage where we have different types of VR experiences. This is something, I know we had the question earlier about different types of VR. Have you tried VR? So how many have tried the VR that actually have the phone basically in your face? Okay, so quite a few. And how many have tried the VR and actually tethered to a PC? So just, okay, so we still have a few there too. So there's differences. With the phone-based VR, you actually have only 3 degrees of freedom, so you can basically just rotate your head, pitch and yaw. And it's a really kind of a 360 experience. You can basically look all around, and it's wonderful, but there isn't really much you can do more beyond that. The interactivity is somewhat limited because it's somewhat gaze-based. There are more advanced devices by Google Daydream and Samsung Gear where you now have a controller to kind of act as a navigator. And so that's kind of one level of VR. It's more ubiquitous. It's definitely out there in the market, and there's certainly a great place for it too. Now, what we also have is positional as 3 additional dimensions. So that's actually called 6 degrees of freedom, and that's what we get in kind of the more high-end premium headsets like the Vive and others. And you can actually translate as well as rotate. So now you actually have room to move. The world moves in this perspective that you're moving towards or away from, and you can actually look all around. So that actually simulates and gets you to a much deeper level of immersion and really a sense of true presence that you can't get in basic kind of mobile VR at this stage. So here is example of the Vive, and where you can basically be seated, you can move around, you can actually stand up, you can walk around. The setup right here in front of me is essentially what is state-of-the-art today. And here's kind of what the current generation premium VR looks like. So you can see here, this guy actually catches the controller even though he's essentially blind. His viewpoint is blocked by his headset, but because of the tracking technology today, you can actually see that virtual object and catch that virtual object just as like you would actually see a ball in real life and catch that real ball. So right now the technology has really progressed in this third age of VR, if you will, where you have extremely high degree of tracking precision, you have much more robust computer graphics, and you kind of have really the bandwidth to be able to funnel that through. And that's also enabled by the internet, of course. So this is kind of a mixed reality setup where you actually can see a third-person view of what this person sees in VR, as opposed to what we'll be showing later on, which is more first-person, which is kind of what I'm seeing. But this is a very powerful way of envisioning what it looks like in VR. And now, of course, Walter does talk to me about healthcare and VR, but games is really the early adopter for VR. I mean, we all kind of understand that hardcore gamers love the visceral experience of VR first, whether it be shooting objects or killing robots. It's really kind of one of those things where gamers have really identified with VR, and they've been the earliest adopters. But that doesn't mean that it's actually not made its way into the enterprise. In fact, actually, it's being very heavily adopted by the automobile industry, for one, among others. So here's an example where you are basically in a showroom situation, but you don't need to be in an auto dealership. You could be at home doing this, where you're checking out the features of a car. You're able to look under the hood virtually, and you can actually be seated there. You could actually have the sensation of understanding what each feature of the car is, and it's a very good way of showcasing the car kind of to a wider audience. Every auto manufacturer out there right now is using VR. They're using it in manufacturing, they're using it in design, collaboration, and a lot of them are using it for showrooming too. But they all understand the importance and power of VR, and that extends well into the enterprise, beyond automobiles, into healthcare for sure. Now, the magic of VR, or the power of VR, is the fact that you can also do things that you can't do in real life. So this is a very popular application called Tilt Brush, where you can actually paint in 3 dimensions. You cannot do this in real life. You can't actually paint using the entire room as your canvas. It would be boxed by walls or ceilings, but you can actually now have unbounded ability to create whatever you want. A lot of times when people try this experience in VR, they actually start getting it. They understand the potential and the sheer power of how VR and how basically a computer system and a different set of screens can impact your emotions. So I wanted to dive a little bit into some of the healthcare applications. I know Walter had covered some of this, but I wanted to maybe have one of the foremost known doctors in the country talk a little bit about VR. So let's roll this video here. This came from CES, which is back in January, and he describes how VR in healthcare is, how game-changing it really is. Let's see here. Oops, can you run that video? Can you turn the audio up, please?
Beautiful Las Vegas.
This is day 2 at the Win for CES 2017, and today we're highlighting the medical facet of the Vive VR ecosystem.
What you see behind me is the best virtual reality of the body that I've ever seen. And for all the gamers out there, I know people like shooting things up, but this is where the real action is. This is the most complicated place to do battle. And then if I'm perfectly healthy, it's sort of cool. But if you got a problem, it's even more valuable. Why guess? We can actually look at it. As a doc, I can tell you this is immensely powerful, both to help me educate the next generation of physicians, but for patients, this is visually arresting material. I don't have to explain what the black and white x-ray means. You can actually see what it means in your own body. But even more importantly, to really fix healthcare in America, you need virtual reality. You can actually create Google Maps of the body with virtual reality. Imagine taking a computer screen and forcing you to understand the code behind it. That's what we expect patients to do. Forget all that. Let's bring it alive for you like the rest of the technology world has done. For most of man's history, even physicians couldn't look inside the body. We only guessed. That's changed over the last few hundred years, but we still don't let real people look inside their bodies. This changes that. I'm really proud that ShareCare Reality Labs can work with Vive because it allows us now to have the best technology to show you coolest images about what's happening in your body.
We've got a program called LIFE, which stands for Life-Saving Instruction for Emergencies. And in Kenya, they've been doing research for about 10 years on how to manage emergency situations for children. They've developed a set of guidelines and some training material, and they've been training people in a face-to-face this fashion. And then we started talking to HTC, started telling us about the VR applications with the Vive. The main thing that we've got from it is the difference from other types of applications that people associate with VR. Vive is the first VR experience that we've kind of tried this out with, and it seems to work really well. In particular, is using the handsets. So one thing that you can do on the Engage platform is to pick up bits of equipment and move them around. That's what makes it different from the other methods that we've been trialing. And so without having handsets and being able to walk over and come back again and move to the right place, that would be quite difficult to convey that kind of experience in any other modality that we've tried.
We create photorealistic 3D animations, and then we take those 3D models into a virtual reality world. We're showing a virtual reality medical training based on the anatomy and the physiology of the eye. I've decided to create an application more suited to educate people with a more tangible approach of actually being able to touch and feel and be educated based on that kind of interaction.
Okay, so as you just saw, I wanted to actually demonstrate for you one of the illustrious demos that Dr. Oz had called the Google Maps of the Human Body. But it's actually an experience called UVR. It's a great application of the medical and patient education. And I'm going to put this on, so it'll be a real-time live demo. Are you guys able to see the screen here?
We are.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, one of the things about the Vive is you have the controllers, which you saw in the earlier videos, and basically these can act as tools or hands. Now, we have a female here. We can always change it to a man if we'd like. And then we can actually start taking him and opening him up into his different systems. Let's see here. So, nervous system, skeletal, muscular, etc. And we can actually take his organs. And let's say we want to look at the heart. So once again, this is very good about being able to illustrate how the heart operates. You can see the various ways you can represent the heart, either through flow, nerves, electrical impulse, and you can do cross sections here too. Now, you can do things like put in an ECG, you can adjust the heartbeat, you can look all around. It's a very powerful way for people to understand. Now, if I have let's say I have heart disease here, and I want to actually showcase to my patient that my blockage is about there. And I want to explain to my patient, well, what are some of the ways we can actually solve for this? And we can treat this with a stent. So the stent should come. It's not really cooperating right now, but in theory, the stent should come out, and you'll see basically the whole animation go forward and open up the arterial area that has the plaque buildup. Okay.
Impressive.
Okay, we can go back to the slides again.
I love that stuff.
Here's again another application that does more about medical training for medical students. In this case, it's in the realm of the optometry and eye physiology. Can you play that video? So it's more pedagogical approach to learning. You have definitions, quizzes, and contextual interactions. Yeah, are you able to play the video, Greg? Oh, we can probably skip past that. But what you can see is that I can describe for you is basically it's more of a quiz-based approach where they will overlay not just the anatomy parts, but they'll actually describe what they are. They will actually take you through the lessons, and then you actually will have quizzes at the end, and they will actually show you the analytics behind the quiz around where you actually didn't do as well, what you need to focus on. So again, it's real-time feedback, and if you think about the applications where you have actually AI driving that behind it and learning different patterns of behavior for students who are studying or anyone who's training to learn about the anatomy of the eye or the physiology of the eye, or anything in this case, you can actually imagine how that gets optimized over time. And the pattern recognition that AI provides in conjunction with the VR experience will make it a more smarter training tool. Are you back to the PowerPoint, please? Okay, the other one. All right. So this is actually another use case for healthcare. This is actually taking the actual CT scan or MRI and using this for pre-op surgical planning. So, for decades we've actually been training radiologists and surgeons to look at 3D images of your organs or parts of your body in 2D ways. So you have planar slices of images laid out against the light, and that is actually quite unintuitive if you think about it. Why would you look at slices of an image as opposed to the image itself in full 3D? So it's very counterintuitive. What we have here is now you're able to actually take the DICOM data, look at it in VR, and surgeons can use it for planning. They can use it for identifying things that they can't see otherwise, and it's actually happening right now. So this is a company called Surgical Theater that does this, and I think the other application that VR affords is around visualization, not just of the DICOM data, but of the data you're showing, Sanjeev, right? So the data around all the behaviors and the patterns, that was great to see on 2D flat screen. But what if you could actually dive in VR? You could zoom in just as easily as you did with selecting with your mouse and keyboard. You can manipulate the data in ways that you couldn't otherwise do it, and that has obviously huge implications in pharma. So we also have other applications around. Can you play this video? This is actually a
6 months ago, Pierre Martineau's left arm was in such excruciating pain he couldn't lift a kitchen
pain management
skillet, let alone
treatment,
this desk.
which is actually alive and well right now. Pain management, pain therapy are very big in VR.
With painkillers, so he stuck it out until he found Dr. Kim Bullock at Stanford, who offered him an unconventional treatment.
So you see both hands are moving together.
Virtual reality with high-tech goggles often associated with video games, now being used for something much more serious.
What I'm finding most surprising and promising is the amount of pain relief people are having.
Dr. Bullock, a neuropsychiatrist, says she made the remarkable discovery by accident while studying virtual reality for conditions like severe anxiety. A welcome side benefit of that treatment, patients' chronic pain disappeared, and quickly.
They'll have the pain relief for at least a week, and then for some people, they may have many months of the pain relief.
Yeah, I see that.
So what are these patients doing in the virtual world? For Pierre, he's actually moving his pain-free arm. But when he looks through the goggles, he sees the injured arm doing the work. In this case, trying to pop balloons that are floating all around him. After just 5 sessions, he says his pain disappeared.
The cost to me was really minimum, just a little bit of time and no side effects.
Dr. Sean Mackey, one of the nation's top pain experts, says the treatment works by tricking the brain.
And that's where the excitement for VR comes in, is the opportunity to rewire our brains into a more normal state so that we're not experiencing as much pain.
Is this the future of pain management?
I think it's one of the critical features of pain management.
Oh, yes.
For patients like Pierre, the future is already here.
So Dr. Kim Bullock is a neuropsychiatrist at Stanford, one of Walter's colleagues, and she's been very much at the forefront for VR. I wanted to show you actually this experience, so if you can switch over to the screen here on the virtual reality side. You guys able to see this? Okay, great. So again, this is not just exposure therapy, not just distraction therapy, but you're seeing that the neuroelasticity that's allowed by VR can actually allow you to rewire the brain and treat pain that way. So here's just an example of a wellness application that does do that. I mean, you saw the video there that had it with one arm with the burn victim, but this actually also allows you to do, in terms of empathy and virtual reality. There's a film artist named Chris Milk who gave a TED Talk 2 years ago, and he famously called virtual reality the ultimate empathy machine because of its ability to connect people to places and experiences that you can't get otherwise. Other mediums such as film, video, TV, what have you, they are just portals where you can actually just maybe see what's going on and hear what's going on, but that's it. When you're actually in virtual reality, however, you're actually there. You actually viscerally feel, hear, you can actually see it, it's all around you, you can move in that space. And those things are much more powerful than what you get in today's technology. So one of the things about technology is we're being ever more interconnected through our phones, through our social media, but increasingly we're actually being more isolated. Virtual reality has an opportunity to open that up and take you to the places and the times and the people, so it's not just over there, it's actually there with you. One of the things that he actually did was a film called Clouds Over Sidra, and this is about Syrian refugees, and it's about a 12-year-old girl named Sidra, and he basically spent time filming her life in 360, so people could get a sense for that of what it's like to be in the camps. It's very powerful. If you haven't tried it, I would suggest you look at it. There are folks in also the Stanford's Virtual Human Interaction Lab where Walter's at, Professor Jeremy Bellinson, who've been working on projects around empathy at scale. So they're actually looking to explore ways to design and test virtual reality experiences that teach empathy. So you might, as you may have seen earlier, but experiments including whether or not seeing a 65-year-old avatar of yourself will allow you to save more for retirement, and actually that's been proven to be true. It's actually shown the case that people actually are more likely, twice more likely to save for retirement if they see themselves at that age. Or for example, if they are taking an experience and they're actually in a forest with an axe and they're chopping down a tree, they're more likely to actually conserve on paper and paper towel usage after they do that experience. So there are lots of things that certainly virtual reality can do for empathy and affecting change. I wanted to kind of show one as well. Let's see here. This is called the Virtual Human Mirror. And Sanjeev, I'll need your help.
Yes.
Here. Yeah. So just let it run first. So this one is actually, this one's an identity experience. So in this experience, it's putting you in the eyes of different ethnic and gender situations. So pretend I'm this guy. Pretend I'm a white, Caucasian male, middle-aged. I do have the goatee, so that's looking okay. I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I'm saying, hey, what's up? And I actually feel like, yeah, that's me, right? Now, if you hit number 1 on that left computer, now I'm an African-American female. It's a little bit disorienting at first because I look at my hands, they don't look like the color of my real hands. I look at myself in the mirror, it's actually matching what I'm doing. But over time, I'm starting to think, okay, I'm starting to identify more just because of the fact that she's mirroring exactly what I'm doing, and I don't get as alien a sensation for that. Now you can actually hit any of the other numbers. Yeah, now I'm a Caucasian female.
Blonde.
But this gives you a sense, and there's actually so it does actually allow you to self-identify more with different types of people and different types of races. And this has been proven to be very impactful for just understanding race relations and gender relations even. All right. Let's see. How are we doing for time? Okay.
Couple minutes.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to, at this point, I'm not going to go through any more demos because I think that maybe you get a sense for it. There is one also that the Stanford Virtual Human Interaction Lab has around ocean acidification, and it's very, very impactful. It does teach you about the fact that our oceans are dying, the coral reefs are dying, and people don't know why in general, but the reality is because of the sulfuric acid and carbon emissions. But again, these are ways to evoke empathy and to actually cause behavioral change once people actually go through these experiences. And we all know from research that's been done over decades that learning and experiencing things in VR or just in real life, whether it be virtual or not, is much more impactful from a retention basis than learning it from a book or learning it in hearing about it or even watching a video. So we've really understood, and I think we're really kind of at the stage now where empathy in VR has the ability to do a lot of good to the world. HTC has launched a VR for Impact fund. We announced that back at Davos, and that's a $10 million fund with the intention of actually bringing the good into virtual reality experiences, because we believe it's actually our responsibility, as well as anyone in technology's responsibility, to bring the good about VR and affect those kinds of behavioral changes and bring those empathetic experiences to the public. So we feel very passionately about that. And we're not necessarily an AI company, but we certainly are looking very closely at that. And of course, when you kind of marry those two things together, VR as a mechanism and delivery tool, and then AI as the way to be able to kind of also personalize that to your experience, I think those will be extremely powerful ways to change behavior to come. Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Good stuff. I want some.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Our last but not the least presenter is Dr. Skip Rizzo, where all of this actually gets applied to the world you're most familiar with, which is the clinical science world and the clinical application world. So you've now seen some examples of technology, applications, foundation. Now let's bring in the patient into this, and how do we make this patient-centric? So I'll give Skip Rizzo the platform now.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe if I could put that down here.